and we are excited about a round table tonight. I love round tables where we can just hear from multiple voices. And so we have gone out and uh, asked some friends and people that we have admired and respected for years who have been in worship ministry and have done this. In fact, I was thinking today, between all, I guess, six of us that will be on this round table, there's well over probably 100 years of
Easily,
combined
easily.
music and worship ministry in church. And so I am excited to hear the great things. And we have a simple question tonight. It just says, "What I wish I knew when I started in ministry." And so I'm so excited to have these. And Gabe, I'm going to let you do the introductions tonight, but welcome. Please like and subscribe, especially if you have a music pastor, a worship pastor, or even some younger person that is
Yep.
interested to get into ministry. They need to tune into this tonight and hear this wisdom that's going to come. I know it's going to be great. I don't even have to worry about it, wonder about it. I know these people, and I know that these people are going to pour some straight nuggets into onto your plate if you're willing to partake. So go ahead, Gabe, and
It's going to be
introduce her.
gold tonight. So we're going to go ladies first with met her at Lee University, served with her in campus choir in the chapel band, and she was on our last round table with women in worship, Miss Angie Woodside, who also resides here in the great Tar Heel state of North Carolina.
Yes. Excited to be here.
Yes, good stuff. And next we have the academic, though. When you meet him and you know him and you talk to him, you just think people call him Doc because he's the senior and he's in leadership, but he is a doctor. This is Dr. Michael Figgers, the mentor, one of the mentors of my best friend, who I'll introduce last, but Dr. Michael Figgers, who also resides here in the great state of North Carolina.
Yes, sir.
It's my pleasure to be with all of you tonight.
And we'll let you all do a quick little intro so you can introduce yourselves. And then, of course, Sharvis, are you there? I see your SW, but I don't see your camera, so I'm gonna turn him on. There he is.
There he is.
And my brother from another mother, Sharvis Whitted.
Hey, man, how you doing?
He was with us last week, dropping. He had Jonathan taking notes for 30 minutes with his revelation of worship and King. Was it Jeroboam? King Jeroboam in Second Kings?
Yeah, Jeroboam and yeah.
Let me tell you, you got to go back and watch that. And the serving lead pastor, I said last with Sharvis, but I had to scroll down. And I was like, wait a minute, where's James? He was all the way at the bottom. So all the way, not in the Eastern time zone. He is in the past. We are in the future. So we're, Pastor Marty McFly. So Pastor James Coulter serving out there in the great state of Arizona, right?
That's right.
That's right. Yep. It's still afternoon over there. So whatever mistakes we make right now, he can correct it because he's
I can fix them. Yeah. And I may be one of the only ones on here that still has sunshine in the sky. I don't know. We'll see.
We got a little bit. Well, let's start with you, James. If you'll give just a quick, little 60, 120 second introduction of yourself, kind of tell us your background, how you got into ministry to where you're at, and then Jonathan will kick it off with the first question.
Man, it's too much to say how I got into ministry. Honestly, the short is God led me. I mean, and I know that sounds like a cheap thing. I never, ever thought when I was at Lee University with y'all, I never thought I'd be a pastor. Most of you probably didn't think I would either. Never thought I would be a worship pastor. People would say, are you going to be a worship pastor? And up to the point that I took my very first worship leader position at a church, I said no. So it was all God directed. I met you guys, of course, at Lee University, which was a part of God's plan and training for my life, was to be with Doc Horton. Many of us on here know and love him, served under him, and my spiritual daddy. And I'm kind of nervous because a lot of the things that I have to share, I actually learned from him, and it may be things that you guys share as well. So, but yeah, that's the short. And I'm serving as a senior pastor in Arizona. Huh?
Whoever says it first just has to
That's
come.
right. Gets the credit.
We were talking about you before you came on when we were getting everything dialed in. We were like, well, he was supposed to be the white Larnell Harris. So
That's right.
Well,
and
that's an honor.
Doc
Is that who you were talking about when
Yeah.
about? Oh man,
when you came in.
him. I sang with him one time. I got to see him in the studio, and I got to sing with him one time. Just an
Wow.
honor.
Awesome.
My
Awesome.
hero. My hero.
That's Dr. Figgers, Doc Figgers' fave. That's his fave as well. So
Yeah. He's the
Sharvis,
man.
you were on here last week, so give us your just a little quick thing again, and we encourage you, go back and watch last week's. I'm telling you, go back and watch it. But go ahead, brother.
Yeah. So I'm in Florida here. We do still have some sunlight, and just like Brother James said, ultimately God called me. But for me, my experience was I'm third generation, so I grew up with a grandmother that played in church. Both parents played in church, and I was the one child that took it and had the gift for it, and I've been doing it ever since. I know Doc Figgers very well. He's one of my mentors. So that's me. And I'm just at a point now I want to just have more of a pastoral focus to help prepare the next generation. So that's where I am now.
Mm-hmm. Doc, go for it.
Well, first of all, I'm just glad to be on in the room with everybody else and to hear all the experiences. But I started when I was 8 years old. I used to just love the way my aunt looked as she played piano on Sunday. Grew up in a Baptist church, and she was the minister of music. We didn't call it that then, but I just loved the way she looked and seemed like she was just having so much fun. So I would go up after church and bang on the piano. She'd hit my hand and tell me to stop, but I wouldn't stop. So she finally taught me how to play. Fast forward, I had my first choir at age 14, community choir of about 25, 30 young teenagers, and all of them were older than I was. Some of them were even in college. From there, I served in Tallahassee right alongside of Sharvis for years in a church there in Tallahassee. I was minister of music for about 10 years there, and then moved to, as Gabe said, the Tar Heel State here in Charlotte, and served as director of worship and arts and music ministry at Nations Full Community Church for 17 years. And so, while doing that, became a part of the faculty at UNCC, University of North Carolina here in Charlotte, and also doing gospel music with that in that department as well.
Tremendous. Angie?
Well, I began singing in church when I was probably 10, 11, 12, and never dreamed, it sounds like it's similar maybe to James, I never dreamed that I would be in full-time local church ministry. My vision, my goal was different, and but the impetus for that would have been Dr. Horton, because I finished my bachelor's in vocal performance, and we had many, many conversations, and I'd had the opportunity to serve under him as student director with campus choir, and he just, threw it out there. Have you ever considered getting your master's degree? And I said, well, no. And so after much prayer and just felt like the Lord directed my steps to do that, and from there, I've just been in church, local church ministry, music ministry ever since. And it sounds like it's very similar to a lot of you. My husband and I now are lead pastors. And so it seems like that kind of is the progression. And I think it may have been, I don't know if it was Sharvis that said it or Doc that said it, but this hunger to pour into the next generation and to really bring them up, really give them room to come on board and to use their giftings is our heart in this season very much. So I'm just honored to be here with all of you. So thank you for inviting me to be part of this.
Right. Yeah, I thank you so much, guys. I'm so excited to hear from you tonight. I want to just give a quick, I wasn't in campus choir. I was over with the non-Pentecostal group, the lead singers.
There it is.
No, I'm just messing with you. We were definitely Pentecostal, but it's funny. And of course, I was as Pentecostal. I was probably the most Pentecostal guy there at Lee, and it was so funny because
I can verify
Dr.
that.
Dr. Horton at least once a semester would pull me aside and say, "Hey, now I've got a spot for you if you ever want to come over and sing with us." And I'm like, "Brother, I'm just going to stay where I'm at." But he would tell me that about once every semester. And I'd tell Dr. Malden, he'd get so aggravated. He'd like, he don't need to be asking you that. You'd have to be at the school to understand. But it was, anyway. So I really like for you guys to make it personal. If somebody could go back to when you first got started, the ministry, and tell you some things, or at least one major thing that you said, man, I wish I'd have known this starting out. Is there anything that you could glean and say that you wish you knew now, then what you know now? And I'd love for just to hear, your heart on that tonight as you speak. I'm gonna start with Doc Figgers here. Doc, tell us what you would have loved to have heard.
Certainly. When I first saw the caption, there were two things that came to mind just right away. The first thing is I wish that I had known early on that worship and leading worship is not necessarily just what you do, but it's what you become. That it's not a performance. It's not getting up on Sundays or on Wednesday nights and you have the church doing the acrobats that you lead them in, and you do all of the wonderful musical things that you've thought about throughout the day, but it's actually connecting your heart with the people that's there, and it's letting your spirit connect with them. And it's actually a lifestyle. And that was something that, had I known earlier, I think I would have grown quicker and been more effective in leading music, because there's something that you got to be taught, and it's something that needs to be demonstrated to you, that it's worship is who you are. It's what you become. It needs to be a part of everything you do. You prepare for it by actually spending time with the one who gave you the spirit of worship, and that's God himself. And it's not just a musical thing, but it's actually a heart thing. Once I got grasp of that, the effectiveness of ministry for me became so much, if I can say it this way, so much easier, because I didn't have to work at it being effective or changing lives, because that's the Spirit of God's job. All I need to do is be an open, committed, true vessel. And it took me a while to learn that, but after I did, and I'm still learning it and still doing it. So that's one of the first things.
Great. Angie, what about you?
Well, the first thing that came to my mind was probably the hardest thing for me to learn. And that was that when you are in music ministry, the ministry side of it in the local church setting is really 95% people and 5% music. Like, that was a wake-up call for me.
Wow. Yeah.
Because I felt at our first church, I felt woefully unprepared for leading the people side of it. We were in Northwest Indiana, which I've shared that, in the past, but we had a choir of roughly 35 to 40 people, but we had steel mill workers in our choir. And these were rough guys, and I had spent the last 7 years of my life at Lee University surrounded by musicians and people, who had like-mindedness and like callings. And these were just people who wanted to find a spot to fit in the church. And they maybe had a little bit of ability to sing. And so they wanted to be in the choir. And so it was a whole new world for me to realize, I've got a lot to learn about people, about how to help people feel connected, about how to connect with them, because I'm coming in from the Southeast United States. Southern Belle actually had a gentleman in our choir who was offended when I would say yes sir to him. So I just had so much to learn about the people side of it. And I think some people are very gifted in the people side of it. I just felt personally unprepared in that area. That side of it, I'm self-aware. I'm a extroverted introvert. So I was just used to, my world, and didn't realize that there would be a whole group of people who would want to do what I had experienced in those other venues. But how did I bring them into that? And how did I bring that to them when it all seemed foreign? And how did I relate to them? Because I had been in university world for so long. And so that was a real, that was probably the real whiplash of my first year or so of local church worship ministry. So, yeah.
How about you, Sharvis?
Yeah. When I saw the caption, the first thing that came to my mind was, I wish someone would have taught me that to endure in music ministry, you have to learn the art of balance. So I was, Jonathan, I am a dual person. So I teach a lot, and I also do music. And so because you're in music ministry, you're out front. And so a lot of times it's not that you're better than anybody else, but sometimes your gifts are on display so people can see what you do. And you guys know how that works. And people see what you can do. They want you to do more. And that's different for a single man than it is for a married man. And sometimes we tend to attach what we do in the church more closely to our relationship with God than the things that we do outside of the church. So sometimes this unintentional tension happens to where I feel like if I don't give my 100% to the church, I'm letting God down. But we don't realize that my family is also ministry. Actually, ministry is everything that God has given me. So sometimes you create this unintentional situation where you're giving, in your mind, I'm giving everything to God, but also this thing called a family is not getting what it should get as well, because no one told you that no, ministry is not just what you do in the four walls. It is everything. So for me, you get burned out, you get tired, but then there's a frustration where you feel like, no, but I got to keep doing, because if I don't, I'm going to let God down. And so I just wish I would have learned earlier just how to see everything as ministry, see everything as an offering to God, but then the wisdom of how to see my family, have balance, and so sometimes learn the masterful word of, no, I can't do that. Yeah.
Great. What about you, James?
All of that. I wish I'd have known all of that. No, seriously. I'm now, I've been in ministry for 26 years now, and full time. And I'm just now learning the art of no, which is really hard. But no, when I was thinking of this, there were two things that came to my mind just instantly. One of them is to piggyback off of what Angie said, was I had to learn that if I get the music right, but the people wrong, I get it wrong. If I get the music wrong, but I get the people and the Lord right, I get it right. And like Angie, coming from a place where, I wasn't just at Lee University. Angie was the same way. We were in the studio all the time, doing recordings, professional recordings. And so we were surrounded by tremendous musicians and singers, and really put to the test constantly and honing our gift. And to step from that, she stepped into steel mill workers. I stepped into South Georgia tree farmers. And, you didn't do anything on Friday nights because everybody was at the football game, and you didn't do anything on the weekends because everybody was hunting, And so learning the people skills, learning that the music was not the most important thing. And then along with that was a lesson I learned from Doc, which I wished I'd learned it so much earlier. And that was that my primary responsibility as a worship pastor was not to lead worship. That was not my primary responsibility. It was not to lead the department. That was not my primary responsibility. My primary responsibility was to see that the pastor's vision got fulfilled, because God was going to give him the vision for the church. Then he would share that with us. And it was our job, my job as an associate pastor over worship, to see that vision was fulfilled through my duties. That's a very different thing than what the concept of worship pastor I had starting out. And so I'll just kind of leave that there. That was a big learning curve. And the moment I learned that was an absolute transformational moment in ministry for me.
Yeah, I think, I love these answers because they're so, I'm with you guys. I identify with everything that you guys said. I think for me, I wish someone had just told me that sometimes to get to the greatest victory, I would have to walk through the greatest struggles. And I guess I kind of came out of school with a naive belief that if you were in God's will, it should all go fantastic. And if you were not in God's will, then, that's when things went rough. That's when it got to be a hard, tough time. And so, it created a lot of confusion in me because, things would get to going tough. And I'd think, man, I'm doing everything that I know to do. I'm giving all my energy, talent, time. I'm pouring into people. I'm pouring into the music. I'm pouring into the worship. And they don't like me. not everybody, of course, but I just wasn't, because I was like, I haven't done anything to them. And everywhere I've gone, I've always had at least one that, for no logical reason, just don't like me, or some reason, and I think, oh, I'm not doing something right. And God, what am I doing wrong? It's like I was guilty of something because I was, very much a kind of a people pleaser. I just wanted everybody to like every song. I wanted everybody to like every, I wanted to just inspire and help. And I think when I realized, hold on, I'm actually doing it right, and I'm still facing the opposition, and that's kind of part of it. Sometimes that the enemy is going to fight and push back, and I just wasn't quite prepared for that reality at first, and took me some time to just, because I'd get my feelings hurt. I'd be sitting in my office weeping. What's going on? And like, man, I'm not able to. Should I be doing something else? And I think we've all been there. You just think, man, what am I doing here? Because you want to help people so much, and you want it to be so good, and you want it to be everything it should be. And I had to really develop that rhino skin that, and no pun intended because of my size. So don't start making jokes. But that alligator skin, that's a better one. It is sleek, but yet tough. But I had to develop the alligator skin to say, and really the spiritual discernment to say, look, and really the biggest thing, and I'll shut up here and let you guys talk some more. But I also had to realize that real scripture where it comes alive, where it says we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, because a lot of times I would stay long enough to realize that opposition I felt was a spiritual issue. Mm-hmm. Never nothing to do with the music. Didn't have anything to do with the personalities. It was something spiritual going on in the person, that when I began to see them through God's eyes and the empathy, and I began to win some of these people to what I was trying to do, because I think they were able to finally see and develop that sense of being able to take no offense. Y'all know what I'm talking about? When you just have to let it go.
Right.
And you have every right to want to strike back and be mean or get out or go somewhere else. But I just had to take no offense and just had to learn how to let God and the peace of God and the kindness of God move across them and win them to. And let me go on and do a follow-up question with this though, guys. I mean, think about the things that I guess you say what you wish you knew, but what is something you wish you could have learned that was a warning, like do not do this? If you had a young person coming to you and said, hey, look, tell me what I should not do, what you would warn against, the easy pitfall, so to speak. I know I have one in my mind. And I'll let anybody go first that wants to go. Just jump in. Who's got one that says, hey?
I'll take that one because I didn't do the last one, but it's perfect because it actually fits this better. Don't try to build your own kingdom in a day. So number one, don't try to build something that's you think is yours, because it's not. And even if you are doing, your all the intentions are correct, it's not going to happen overnight.
Mm-hmm.
If I could do anything to myself for like the first 5 years of ministry, it's not going to happen in weeks or the first few months. It's measured in decades, not even years.
Yeah. I think for me, I wish somebody would have just told me they're not the Singers. They're not Elevation. They're not. They are not. They are not Brooklyn Tab.
Yeah.
They are not the people, because you go in there thinking, boy, I'm getting ready to do the same thing that I just came out of, and it's like, wah 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 wah.
Yeah. All day long.
Yes.
All day long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, I'm telling them what Dr. Horton told me. It ain't working. He told me to shut up. Now they mad and leave.
Yeah, we were paying him.
Dr. Malden would get all over me, and so I thought, well, that's what you do. I ticked some people off. I was like, what you mad about? That's what I got.
Yeah. I'll piggyback off of that. I had two things. One was because it fits perfectly. We'd had a beautiful Sunday morning. This was in Homerville, Georgia. Had a beautiful Sunday morning, really powerful service. Man, I was so fired up for Sunday night. We got into Sunday night rehearsal. Everything was phenomenal. And just you could feel the Spirit of God in the room. We get into service, and it was like everybody was mad. Nobody wanted to worship. I don't even think anybody sang except for the choir. And boy, this is a horrible moment. Third, is it maybe the second, maybe even the second song? I stopped and I said, look, I don't know what's wrong with y'all. Can't believe I'm admitting this. I said, I don't know what's wrong with y'all. I said, but I got better things to do than to stand up here and to try and worship if I'm looking out and you're not even going to try to do anything. I said, now let's give this another shot. And we went back, into it, and they graciously did not kill me, and they did their best. And I called up a good friend of mine, Keith Duncan, that night, and I was sharing my frustration, and he shared this with me. This is the nugget. He said, James, never kick the sheep. Sheep do not respond to pain. They respond to love. And that was I took that lesson with me. For forever and a day. And so there have been moments I've wanted to kick the sheep.
Yes, Lord.
But you can't. And then, I'll leave it there. I've got more, but I'll leave it there.
James, I can sorely relate to your what you just shared, because I learned the hard way that it's people that's more important than my idea of perfection. Yeah. And I had some great teachers, still have some great teachers, and the teachers that I had, they were like disciplinarians when it came down to music, and when it came down to make sure that it's right. You don't play substitute chords, you play the chords that's recorded, that kind of thing. And I had that kind of mindset. And even when you're dealing with, as Angie said, people who may not be trained, sometimes we can be so stuck in that vein that it has to be just like it is in my head, that you sacrifice people's hearts and their feelings just to accomplish that musical thing. I never forget, and this was the lesson that turned my whole idea of how to handle people around. We were preparing to do a worship service, and this was some time ago. And I had already the set that we were going to do, the music that we were going to do, the songs, and they related to the message and that kind of thing. But an older lady, wasn't that much older, but an older lady came and said, listen, can you sing just a little bit of this particular song? and it was not in the set. And the song wasn't the most, well, it was an older song. It didn't have no deep, profound spiritual meaning, at least not to me. And I told her, I said, I'm sorry, ma'am, but we won't be able to do that. That's not in our set. And besides, I don't know how much that particular song is going to edify the congregation. Well, that broke her heart. And the thing is not so much what I said, but how I said it and the spirit that I said it in. I've never been a mean guy, but I had that kind of pompous kind of attitude. God, I'm ashamed that I'm even admitting that now. But a lady came to me later and said, Mike, what did you say to her? She hasn't stopped crying since you talked to her. And this was before service. And I said, I just told her that we already had the songs that we were going to do. And she said, I understand that. She said, but what you did not take care of her was her heart. She was hurting. She needed something. Even if you didn't do that song, maybe you could have suggested something else that would have ministered to what she had a need for. And that thing taught me, it took me weeks to get away from how I had treated her, not intentionally, but I just wish somebody had told me earlier. And I know we say it that way, but really nobody can tell you these things. You have to kind of live through them. That changed the importance of how I treat people, how I minister to people, how I include people. And that's not to say every request that you get, you got to go do it, but it's the way you handle it. And that was a big, big, big lesson for me, that it's not all about what your plan is and your set that you have, but it's what's going to minister to people.
Yeah, it made me think about it when I was, my second church, and I had a guy come up, older, 80-some-year-old man named Brother Hinton, and he said, "You ever heard of that song, Oh What a Savior?" I was like, "Oh yeah, I've heard that old song." And he said, "Yeah, it's my favorite." I said, "I'll sing it for you one day." And he goes, "You do that for me?" And I said, "Yeah, I will." And one Sunday morning, I just started singing it, and I looked back there, and the man was just weeping. And in that moment, the Lord just touched my heart and said, "That is leading worship." Because it was not a song I would have picked, but it was a song that meant something to him. And I think I would tell a young worship leader, I know I'm sorry, I don't want to, but I would tell him, find the heart music. You've got to find the heart music of where you're at, and quit listening to the radio to find it, but listen to what the people are telling you.
Yes.
Say it again.
Yeah, people are listening to the radio and say, "Oh, that's great," but you've got to listen to the congregation. What are they saying means something to them, and start there. You can lead them from there, but if you don't start there,
Correct.
you're not going to lead them anywhere. You won't ever have their trust.
Yeah.
Sharvis, what about you, man?
Well, you guys have taken all the thunder. Yeah, I mean, it's just the same thing. I mean, one phrase that sticks to mind with me that the Lord gave me is, you have to learn to drive the speed limit where you are. Especially, I think most of us have probably been in different worship contexts. I know I have. So the one that I'm in now is a completely different kind of church. The median age is probably 59. But the church I came from before there, where Dr. Figgers and I served, he'll tell you it was 80% college students. You can imagine the difference in genre, the difference in style. Also being in a college town, the difference in musicianship. You just could do more. And it's not that in the new place, you cannot get that place to a certain place, but God's like, I'm going to send the people, just drive the speed limit while you're there. Do what you can, work with what you have. And over time, I'll begin to send the people. But yeah, I can't top what you guys said.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, me and Gabe have talked about this a lot. I mean, we're seeing a lot of this, what I call cookie cutter music ministry, where it's you get online and you start looking through everybody's Facebook live feeds on Sunday morning after church, like I do. Sorry, I look through everybody's and it's like same songs. It's like everybody's trying to be an Elevation or a Bethel,
Same outfits,
or
same stage design,
same outfit, same stage design, same everything. And I don't know what y'all feel about it. I'd love to hear your takes, because it just gets to me a little bit. I'm just like, it's not.
Angie's got a motherly look on her face. I think she's cooking something.
I don't know. Tell me where I'm wrong, Angie. Tell me where I'm wrong.
Well, I think it's half and half. You know, I think we see something in those settings. You know, we love to watch Elevation. We love to be in services. We've been taking a group to Passion, and man, when they come out and they lead, oh, the place is just electric, you know. And that's what we're really hungry for. But sometimes we set our artistry aside and say, oh, if I'm gonna have that experience, it's got to be that. And I know I did this coming out of, you know, our experiences at Lee. I was looking to recreate campus choir instead of realizing that, and somebody I think alluded to this earlier, but God's not locked in that box. You know, we've said for years, you know, James, I think you would agree, and Gabe, that there was nothing about campus choir that would have told you that God would have done what he did through campus choir.
Nope.
God just decided to do that. And so my goal is not to recreate a campus choir, but my goal is to create an atmosphere where that spirit of freedom and worship, and where that presence of God that brings breakthrough, that was what we were so hungry for. You know, my husband, of course, traveled with us as well. And he said, you know, we were a traveling revival, and we were, but it wasn't because of us. It was because the Spirit of God was there. And I think if we can bring back the artistry of saying what we want is the Spirit of the Lord to have that kind of freedom in our gathering. But in order to do that, it's not necessarily going to look the same as far as staging, as far as how we dress, as far as how we sing, what we sing. It's going to be different, and it's going to be different at every church in different seasons. I know our churches, we've been here 3 years, and we've kind of moved into a season now where we are having more young people on the platform than we have even people my age and older. And everybody's great with that. They're open to that. Some churches may not be open to that. So I think it's bringing the artistry in to meet where we are, you know, and it's being honest about where we are. So many of you have discussed that, you know, but it's just, you have to be real about where you are and sometimes where you're not, you know. I know what I'd love to do, but I don't have this. So how can I affect something similar that will produce that atmosphere of worship, that will give people an opportunity to enter in?
Right.
Jonathan said something a little earlier that I think also speaks to this. As worship leaders, we've got to not only be sensitive to the musical part, because what's happening, Angie, is sometimes we see things online and we get amazed by the style, and we try to go back home and recreate that style, and we get married to that particular style of music. I know I worked in a setting once where there was a constant not necessarily a battle, but there was some disagreement between what one of the leaders really wanted, and that is adopt this style. You see what's happening at Lakewood, make sure you grab that style. This is what I want it to look like on Sunday morning. You see what's happening at Hillsongs. It's beautiful, it's electrifying, it draws people in. Let's grab that and let's put it here. Well, you know what? I found out that when I started trying to do that it became, Jonathan, that cookie cutter kind of service. It almost felt plastic. But as the music, I had to become so sensitive to this that I discerned what the people needed. And that is, yes, we can blend a lot of that in. We can blend that style in. But sometimes you have to literally go back to the days of the foot tub and the scrub board. And you're going to get that mom, and you're going to get that grandma and that granddad and that uncle there that can't quite grasp that new style, but you start singing something in the style they're familiar with and in the spirit that they're accustomed to. You grab their heart. And if you win their heart, they'll become open to the other stuff. So we as ministers, we got to be sensitive to the whole thing. And I had to have enough pushback, if I can say it, and all of you've been ministers of music, so you know what that means and when that's necessary. I had to say, with all due respect, sir, with all due respect, leader, we definitely going to incorporate this. We're going to use this. We're going to make sure that it's a part of our services, but it does not work for every song at every instance in every service.
Yeah.
And it took a little while to really convince that when the people start responding and saying, that song that you did, I remember that from back in the 80s. And that song I grew up on, and it captivated my heart and it helped me walk with Jesus throughout college or in my early years in my walk. So it's a blended kind of a style that you have to become married to.
Yes.
You know, Doc, when you were saying that right then, I hear this in my spirit, and I would tell a young person that's interested to come, quit worrying about your style and worry about your spirit, because your spirit is what's going to lead them into worship, not your jeans or your hat or the latest song. You've got to work on your spirit, not trying to go against what people dress and all this. But I think we've almost gotten into a Nashville mentality where we've got to, you know, look a certain way, act a certain way, be a certain image. And we see that happening in like, oh man, I want to be like Brandon Lake, or I want to be like Chris Brown from Elevation, or I want to be like Stockstill down there in Bethel, or I want to be like this. And I think what we have to do is God's called you to be you. And the one thing that no one's going to be able to teach you, young person that's coming into this ministry, is no one can teach you how to hear from the Spirit. That's something you have to develop in a relationship that is really, you know, potent between you and the Lord, so that when you step up on the stage, you know, you're not mimicking anyone. It's coming out of a personal relationship that leads people into the presence of the Lord. And I think that's what's missing in a lot of these new worship leaders coming along. They are doing so much to try to emulate the styles and the populars.
And it's not authentic.
It's not
right.
authentic
Ding,
at all.
ding, ding.
It's
Yeah.
gotta come. Yeah. Go ahead.
Right. People can tell when you're trying to be something you're not.
Yeah.
You know, and especially, I guess this is because this is what the Lord has really been putting on our hearts. But this generation that's coming behind us, they can tell when you're being authentic and when
Yes,
you're not.
they can.
And
Yes,
they
can.
don't want you to be. They don't want us to be a recreation of somebody else.
Right.
And what's more important is God didn't call us to be a recreation of somebody else. He gifted each one. I'm looking at 6 very different individuals who have very specific giftings, and those are divinely ordered. And so if I'm going to sit here and say, God, this gifting that you gave me, or this look that you gave me, or this sound that you gave me is not like hers or his, so I don't like it, so I'm going to change it. Now we have dishonored our Creator. And that's one of the things that has taken me years to learn, is I have to be authentic. I have to be myself before the Lord. And I have
the power of real
into that relationship with Him. And when I do that, then He's the one who's going to direct me in those moments, in the conversations, Doc, like you were talking about, that happen. And they always happen right before service. Right before service, somebody wants to catch you and say,
Oh yeah,
ever do this song? And in that moment, you're thinking, I have put blood, sweat, and tears into preparing this. You know, it has taken me weeks to get our team on the same page and get these songs ready. And you want me to go back to this. And in that moment, if we have been digging into our relationship with the Lord, the Holy Spirit He'll catch us and say, just hang on and let me lead you into how to minister, like you said, Doc, to their heart. Let me help you to connect with their heart. And we watched this, again, to go back to our early days with Campus Choir, but how many times would we be in a setting and it just like we were not connecting? I mean, we were not connecting, and Dr. Horton would just stop and he would go back to read back hymnal songs, and the place would just bust wide open.
Yes.
And once that happened, we could sing and play whatever. And they were with us. I mean, it was just like, but it needed that moment of connection for them to say, oh, okay, that's great for you. But then when we sang where they were like, you get us.
Yeah.
Like, you get where we're coming from. And they were ready to go with us. Authenticity.
Angie, without connection, your worship service becomes a concert.
Absolutely.
It's that simple.
Absolutely. And nobody's
If you're not
life
connecting,
is going to change in a concert. I mean, I love to go to a concert, you know, which is one of the things that came to my heart when I was thinking about our time together is, I would say to a young person who may be questioning, is this where the Lord wants me? I would say to make that a matter of prayer. Do you have a calling to worship ministry? Because there are people who are called to concert ministry. And
yes.
there are people who are called to Christian entertainment. I've seen them. They are anointed to be an entertainer in a Christian setting, and it's a different thing than being a worship leader in a worship setting. It's just a different animal. You know, I love the Gaither Vocal Band, but they really, most of the time, are anointed to be Christian entertainers, and people are blessed, souls are touched, but their goal is not to lead people in worship, and that's okay. They know that. And so it goes back to what Sharvis said about, you know, about staying in the speed limit, staying in your lane, you know. Mm-hmm. What's your lane? What is God calling you to? Do you feel called to worship ministry, or do you feel called to another sort of music ministry? And I think we just have to be honest with ourselves. Where is God calling me? What is it? What direction?
I think it's, you know, even the beginning of this call, we talked about it, and I want you to jump in here, James, because, you know, we talked about it on the beginning call with Larnell Harris. Larnell Harris is a great soloist, a concert, you know, virtuoso vocalist. And that's what he is. He's never tried to go to a church and be a worship leader. That's not been his deal. And look, nobody wanted him. Everybody was like, no. That'd be a waste of your time, brother. You need to go from church to church to church, singing and letting that solo voice. And I think that's kind of where you were probably thought you were more headed towards, right, James? More towards that, you know, I'm just going to vocal performance. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Larnell Harris is a significant individual in my life. I didn't grow up in church. Somebody said they were like third generation. If I remember right, maybe it was Sharvis. I grew up seventh generation heathen. So,
there's that authenticity.
It is what it is.
That's right.
And so when I started to sing in church, it was because I started dating a Church of God preacher's daughter. And if you date the preacher's daughter, you go to church, you know. And she was a phenomenal singer. As a matter of fact, she went to Lee. She was in a group from there called Promise a couple of years before we got there. Phenomenal voice. And she wanted to sing, and so we started singing songs, Sandy Patty, Larnell Harris, and the preaching did nothing for me. But singing Larnell Harris's songs, every time I did, something would break through. And so when I felt my walk with the Lord has been different. I didn't feel called. This is going to be weird. I didn't feel called to worship ministry until I'd been doing it 7 years. I felt called to every church I had been at. I knew I was called to that moment, that church, that time. But if someone were to ask me, are you called to be a worship pastor? I was like, no, I am not. And so when I went to Lee, my desire was to give back to the Lord what I felt like he had given to me, which was this voice, this opportunity to do what Larnell Harris had done for me. And in my mind, that was to travel around and sing. And he did allow me to do that to some extent, certainly not at Larnell Harris's level by any stretch. But as I really walked in obedience to the Lord, and I think that's key. That was one of the things that many things on this call that I wish I had known. I think I did it, but I did it by accident. Is that obedience is everything. Mm-hmm. It's not something. It's not a part of it. It's everything. Everything we've talked about. Spending time with the Lord, being obedient to his voice, hearing him in the moment, getting the people right. All of that has to do with obedience. And so I would hear the Lord's voice, and I would follow to the best of my ability. And really, I'm here today Not because at some point I was like, yes, I'm going to be a pastor. I don't know that anybody looked at James Coulter at any point in history and said, you're going to be a senior pastor. But the Lord did. And so, and I'm not saying that with any pride. I don't have a huge church. I think we had 25 people at church on Sunday. But yet I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is where God called me to be. And if I were to step back into some of the church settings where I was before with, almost 1,000 people in attendance, it would be a step backwards, because it's not what God has called me to do. And so, I thought, go ahead.
You hit on that, James, because I think that's a big thing that these young worship leaders need to hear, that the anointing is not in the crowd. Okay. I know that we think that, success is not in the crowd. Oh, that's a big one. Success is not in the number of people you're standing in front of. And I think that's a big thing that I had to learn, because, I went and started a church and I slogged it out for 7 years, and I went through depression because I thought, man, I've got 30, 40 people. And I thought success was like numbers. And that's way a lot of churches are built around. It's all about numbers. And these young people coming into, a worship setting, or want to be worship ministry or in ministry in general, I feel like that's the constant mantra in their ear. Numbers.
Yeah.
If you got a lot of people, that's what makes success.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not. I just wish I'd have known that. I wish somebody could have told me that earlier. It's not about numbers.
Yeah. Vodi Balkum does a great, it's one of the things that broke him out, actually, before, he was on CNN and doing all his stuff over in Africa and Tanzania, before he was an internet personality in the body of Christ in the Western world. He was at a church planting conference.
Saw the same thing.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
I know what you're talking about.
The pastor before him had like 13,000 people at his services, and guy before him had like 30,000. And he said, I have 200 people, and I'm trying to figure out how to get rid of 75 of them to plant another.
Yep.
And he's exactly right. I mean, look the Lord discipled. I mean, he had maybe 100 following him around, but it was 12.
Yeah.
Well,
eventually it got to 0.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was his mom, Mary Magdalene, and John.
And John, I guess you could say, 3.
So he went from 12 to 3.
Yeah.
Well, Gabe, I'm sorry, Jay. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, just real quick, I'll never forget a lesson I learned from a guy that many of us know, Buck Marshall. He was talking about church. He was really struggling, having a tough time, and he was in prayer, weeping before God, and just saying, God, I just, what am I doing wrong? Why is this not going the way I want it to? What's happening? And God's like, what is going on with you? Basically, I'm paraphrasing this thing. And he said, I just wanted to be a success for you. And God looked at him. God told him in his spirit, said, I never asked you to be a success.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because our idea of success is not God's idea of success.
Mm.
If you look at Jesus on the cross at that moment with those 3 people, absolute failure to the natural eye.
And that's how we preach it. That's what Chuck Missler talks about all the time. He said it wasn't a tragedy. It was a triumph. I mean, that's one of the few times he gets emotional when he preaches and teaches. He said, we look at that as like the awe moment. And it's like, that's the celebration. That's when he triumphed over sin, hell, death, and the grave.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he told us to do the same. Carry your cross and follow me. Yeah. Go ahead, Sharvis. I'm going to start preaching.
No, that's it. I mean, I think you have to backtrack, and think about what is the intention of God? What does God want out of all of this?
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about this last week. I mean, and people don't have to get a master's in theology. It's pretty simple. I mean, if you look at the Bible, we talk about Ephesians 5. Why do we sing songs to one another? We want the people of God to be edified. And that in itself is success. I think about Solomon before God gave him all the stuff. I mean, think about it. You've got a genie in a bottle situation. I mean, dude, what do you want? I mean, just say it. You know, but if you go back to First Kings, David's final words to him had nothing to do with success. It's like, look, keep your heart right before God, keep the law. And that was it. And I think that was the fuel for him responding to that request the way he did.
Mm-hmm.
God, give me wisdom so that I can govern your people the way that you want me to.
Yes.
I think in that moment right there, he was more successful than he ever could have been. And so I think that's something that we got to instill in the psalmists that are coming up. Success is, what does God want? God wants the unsaved saved, and those who are saved edified and growing in Christ. And if you got 5 people there and you're doing that in the kingdom, you're successful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important. You got to get to a mindset if you're getting into ministry that you would rather change 2 hearts than entertain 2,000.
Yeah.
And I think you have to get to that place where you just, what's most important is impact and not popularity. And I think that, impact is everything. As I look back on my ministry, you've got to have impact. And I think I've been able to talk to some of these guys that have led these big, or ladies that have led these big ministries. And what's crazy? You get around them and you realize they never planned for it to be that way. They're as surprised as you are. And that a lot of them are just like, I never set out for this. It just kind of happened. And so it's amazing to watch the people that are clamoring around behind them just think, oh, I'd like to be there. And there's a lot of them that would say, I'll trade with you. It's never been their big deal. To them, it was about impact. And I think that's the thing I would tell a young worship pastor or any minister coming in is, listen, don't try to be popular. Try to have impact, especially you young preachers out there. And I've got to speak to, I know we did this about music, but you young preachers out there, it tears me up because I'm thinking, look, don't get up there and preach for response, preach for change.
Yes.
And I think that's a difference. And I think a lot of people are just, they want response and the pats on the back and you preached good. But I always say this, whether it's about music ministry or it's about preaching or teaching, if it's not enough for them to say you did a great job, or you are good, they need to hear, you've hit the sweet spot when they come up and say, God is good. Because in that moment, they got past you and got to the one you were trying to tell them about. If they're stopping at you, then they're only enthralled with your talents. When they get to God, you become, I must decrease so that he must increase mentality.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to, if you're going to get in ministry and you're doing this for popularity, then do something else. I'm telling you, go on America's Got Talent or do something like that so everybody can clap and vote for you every week, because that's not what you get in ministry. I mean, it's that is not what you're going to get. And many times it ain't going to be a pat on the back, but it's going to be, I don't like that. It's too loud.
With that being said, Jonathan, what a lot of upcoming or aspiring ministers of music as well as preachers don't realize that popularity feels good on the moment because people see the glamour and then they give you all the compliments. But everybody who's actually been in ministry and had any degree of success knows that with all of those applause, there's going to be a whole different sect of people who's not going to applaud for you. And you're going to get just as many arrows and darts as you're going to get applauses. And if you're looking for everybody to like you, if what you need is for everybody to see you as the glamour rather than seeing Jesus, then you're going to be up for a really, really rude awakening, because there's somebody who's going to come and they're going to say, listen, I love the way you sang today. It sounded real good. It ministered to my heart. But there's going to be somebody else to say, if your last note that you sang was 20 cents flat, and I couldn't get past that. I couldn't hear the rest of your message because you were 20 cents flat on that last note and you held it too long. And if you don't have no, I'll use your term, Jonathan, if you don't have no alligator skin, then you start taking it personally. But as Sharvis said, it's God's people, it's God's ministry, you're the vessel. And so we got to get past us and realize that success is not necessarily numbers, because all of us know right now, there's some people in the news right now that wish nobody knew their names because of the darts that have come at them recently. So what I'm saying is that you can't go after that because it's going to be disappointing.
Yep.
Oh yeah. And this is the
Yeah.
we live in the age of the internet. So as many amens and pats on the back you get, look at the most successful music ministries on the earth and look at their haters. They have people that have hundreds of thousands of subscribers on YouTube, primarily built off of disparaging these music ministries. Right or wrong, right or wrong, they're making their careers off of hating you, which
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know how you do that as a believer, but they're doing it. Maybe they're not believers, or maybe they're just in extreme error. But yeah, you're exactly right, Doc. If you're doing it for the attaboys, you ain't ready for you're not even saved. You're a worker of the devil.
Live by the sword, die by the sword.
Hey, I'll say this, young minister coming into this, those that love you the most coming in the door will hate you the most when you walk out.
That's the truth.
I don't know why it is, but everywhere I get, the people that would shower me with attention coming through the door would be the ones that hated my guts when I left. And I thought,
my father-in-law told me one time, he said, be cautious of the man that meets you at the door. And I can tell you after 27 years, without exception, he was correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Without exception.
Every time.
I wish I could say
every time.
Yeah. So
I ain't going to say that.
That is so frustrating. So frustrating because when you first go, young people who are aspiring, you need to be aware there's a honeymoon period.
Oh yeah.
Where the place loves you. You are the best thing ever.
Oh.
Probably about at the most maybe 6 months. And I can tell you that every place we've been, almost on the 6-month mark,
it's over.
Changed.
Yes.
And sometimes very much what you said, it's the person who was right there the first day saying, I want to be your armor bearer. That one was a big one.
You're an answer to prayer. We were praying that God would bring you.
And in 6 months' time, how could we even get to that place? It's unfathomable, how quickly the human mind can change.
Yep.
But you have to be prepared for that because it's just part of it. It's just
I'd have them come up to me and say, we don't know how we ever made it without you. And a year later, them same people
they're like,
were
we'd like to find out.
They were campaigning to get me out the door because I had to do something they liked. And I was like, man, you said you couldn't make it without me. Oh, buddy, that changed real quick. I mean, the person that takes you to eat the first time, watch them.
Absolutely.
They'll burn your house down before it's over.
Cap, that's hilarious. Chris Caps in the comments says that then the armor gets heavy.
That's right.
Yep. They're putting it down. They're like, this is too much.
You don't want to carry no more. Yeah.
But you know what it is? What it is, a lot of times it's people that are playing the political game and they think that when you come through the door, they're getting on your side. And when you show that, hey, I'm not going to be bought and I'm not going to be anybody's, whipping post here, I'm going to do what God wants me to do, then they get mad because it didn't work. And so that's why I believe it really happens that way. The politicers will come out the door first and glad hand you and tell you, and man, I'd get them gospel handshakes with $20 bills, and I would think, oh man. And then the first time that you make a decision that, didn't go the way they thought it should go, man, them handshakes, I didn't even get a handshake.
Yeah. And Jonathan, I'll say, Jonathan, I experienced that more so with the people that were already in the creative arts ministry, because what you'll find is a lot of people, they have their own creative vision. They have a place they want it to go, and they will befriend you so that they can kind of jump on your coattails and make their vision come to pass through you. But to your point, as soon as you make it very clear that's not going to happen, then the narcissist comes out sometimes. You said, Angie, that comes with it.
That's right. That's right.
And it takes, I would also
go ahead, Jonathan.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, along with that 6-month honeymoon is over, the flip side of that is, it takes 18 months for people to really grab hold of your vision fully. And so many people give up before that,
Yeah.
you know. And so for us, we've looked at that 18 mark is kind of that 18-month mark is kind of the starting point. You know, it's not that you don't start when you get there, but that's when you start to have the influence that you can move forward. By that point, everything's kind of shaken up.
Yeah.
The people that are going to leave have left. You start to develop some people that are coming in under your vision at that point, and understand your not just your it's not just vision, it's also process. I went to a church where we had tremendously skilled people, tremendously skilled. The issue I ran into was not that our visions were different. Our visions actually lined up quite alike, but the process to get there, my process to get where I wanted the church or felt like the church and the worship department needed to go was very different than theirs. And they weren't upset about the vision, they were upset about the process. And so you just have to know who you are. You have to know who you are. You have to be confident that God has called you there. Know that he hasn't called you there to fail, and then just keep working what you know to do. And eventually things will smooth out and you'll have the influence that you need to move forward.
Jonathan,
Yeah.
can you share the meeting before last that we had with the music council when you brought up that vision sheet? I'll tell that whole story. Y'all have to, for y'all here, and for those that are going to hear this afterwards, you have to hear this, because this is what really this blew me away. I mean, the vision. I mean, this is why I partnered with this brother, man. He's patient.
Yeah. When I went in 2019, I was approached about being the music pastor at the church I'm at now, worship ministries pastor. And I didn't want it. I was trying everything I could to get him to get somebody else. I was like, no. I'm bivocational. I have a successful business. I'm doing a lot of other things. And I was like, and I'm going to be just forthright. I was loving the freedom. I mean, I was loving being able to go to what church I wanted, when I wanted. I loved to be able to do all that. Sorry, I'm just being, transparent. And he kept saying, hey, want you to do this. And I was like, no. And so finally I said, okay, I laid out about a 4-page vision statement. And I went through the leadership, the music. I went through, the sound and, the atmosphere of the church. And I laid out, critiques, and I called it short-term goals and long-term goals. And I kind of gave it to the pastor in 2019. And honestly, he finally hired me, and then COVID hit. Everybody remembers. And so we come out of COVID, and I finally, decided to take the reins of it. And we went for 2 years, and I kept doing the things that I had on the sheet, but I never told anyone. And, I just was, one by one doing things, one after another. Like you said, it took time. The process. But the thing is, I never shared the process. And I had my leader meeting a couple of months ago, and I basically had come to the end of the 4-page vision, and we were pretty much there. And I kind of printed it out and basically handed it to everybody. And I said, hey, this is what I put out in 2019, and we're done with this. We got to go for what's the next iteration of this? And the whole room just kind of looks at me like they thought we were just getting there by accident, almost like, this is just, and I was like, no, I had a plan of what I felt like the Lord wanted to do for 4 years. I've been working on, and now here it is. And, we've done it. And they were just in amazement. And I was like, did y'all think we were just, I was like, no, I had a feeling of where we needed to go. And I would say this to, young worship leaders and young ministers, find a vision and lay out a plan. And even if you don't get there, start moving towards the plan. It doesn't happen by accident. You've got to start laying out, these are goals and things we want to move towards. So I started telling them early on. I mean, when I got to the church, we didn't even have subwoofers. You couldn't even hear a bass guitar. We didn't have you know, we didn't have subwoofers. You couldn't hear a bass guitar. They had electric drums. They said, we got to get real drums. They didn't have, the sound system was all messed up. Needed to get the sound system redone. We didn't have any lighting. I said, we need lighting. We didn't have any leadership established in the department. I said, we need to establish a worship ministries committee. I was like, we don't have any, you know, our worship is just dry, and we need to really come forward and bring the worship forward. And we need to become much more lively spiritually. And I was doing all of this, but I just never was telling anyone. And then when I laid this document, and what was so funny, when I handed everybody, I wasn't even thinking about it. Everybody, that Gabe just kind of looks at me like, man, I didn't know nothing about this. And I was like, I don't know, I've just been doing it. But you know, what I will say is then I was able to take that and do a second one. And now we're working on the second. And so I would say that, you know, it's important to work towards where you feel like God wants you to go. And, you know, really stay committed to that, that even though the ups and downs and you might get a setback, like I had COVID. I did it in 2019, and then COVID hits. Well, it blew my vision. It blew my vision out the water. I mean, I was just trying to keep the doors open. You know, it was like, boom, ain't no vision here. We're just trying to survive. I'm hoping I ain't going to die next week, you know, or something like that, you know. But when we came, you know, when we came out of it, we picked right back up, and we just started laying out this vision. And when people begin to see that you did have a plan, I tell you what, you know, you talk about 18 months, James, and I think what's so sad in today's world is that, I mean, when we grew up, or a lot of times when I even got started, you had Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, committed people. And now that 18 months for a lot of places, 36 months or 48 months, because you just have less time. You got one time a week, basically, and maybe a rehearsal, because nobody does Sunday nights anymore, and everybody's so busy. So it takes longer to get these visions to come to pass. But I think it's important that when you get there, you make assessments and you have some type of goal, and it'll change, and it'll change. But, you know, have a vision in heart and mind, and make sure that your pastor, and it's important that your pastor supports and understands where you're headed. Because if you don't, he's going to get confused and mad and think that you're working against him. So what you got to do is lay it in front of him and say, and that's what I did. I went into the pastor and I said, this is where I want to go with this department. And I told him, I said, if this isn't going to work for you, then let's have that discussion now, because I don't want to come here and realize 6 months into this that we're on a different plane here. This is where I think that it needs to go. If this isn't what you want, then let's get somebody else in here for you. And he said, no, that's what I want. And so when I started moving in those directions, it was supported, and that was we were able to see a lot of that stuff come to fruition. And it's a great feeling. But I would really tell anyone, you've got to do that in such a way that you really bring people into the process. I will say this, and maybe you guys can comment and I'll shut up too, but I think the more that you bring people into that vision and as participants of the vision, instead of watching you do it, and realizing, especially in worship ministry, you just can't do it all. You've got to get people in place that can help you in the different areas, and allow peer leadership. That's one thing I did learn from Dr. Malden that he was fantastic at. When I was at Lee, he was fantastic at developing leadership in his groups. And so I started from the very beginning, and I would elect I still have it. I'd have a chaplain. He said, what? And I felt like it was important. You know, it's one of the most amazing stories. I remember my second church, I had this young guy, Scott Wiggins, that was a police officer. And I remember they asked him I had a chaplain election. I do chaplain, librarian, media, treasurer. I do these officers. And so they nominated Scott Wiggins to be the chaplain. He came to me and said, man, I can't be a chaplain. I'm a police officer. I said, why don't you just let the Lord use you? And he goes, well, I don't know if I can do this. I don't speak in front of people. I said, well, Scott, I think you ought to do this. Well, man, he gets in there and God starts using him. God calls him into ministry. Now he's a pastor down in South Carolina, about 400 or 500 people. And it all started becoming a chaplain in my choir. Mm-hmm. And he was a police officer, and he's a full-time, he's been a full-time pastor for many years. And so I think allowing people's gifts, this is a big one, realizing that your biggest thing is not to showcase your gifts, but to develop the gifts that are under your care. So raising up worship leaders and as I've gotten older, I tell everybody all the time, I'm like, I'm fine if I never sing another solo in my life.
Ooh, man, say
I,
it.
I've sung so much. I'm like, if I could make it to where somebody sang the solos every week, I'd do it. And the only time I do a lot of times is because I feel like I'm just the one that has to. But I'd love to have other people leading worship. And what I've learned is I've developed worship leaders over the years that, there'd be people in their middle ages and they'd say, well, I've always just sang solos. Like, no, you got something deeper than that.
Yes.
You need to learn how to lead worship. And I would teach them how to lead worship. I'd say, build a set. Here's some things that you need to do. Get scriptures in your spirit. And I began to teach them how to lead worship. And it's just to me, that's the most beautiful thing about ministry is I love developing and watching those talents flourish. And then know that impact will outlast you years and years and years and years.
Yes.
Hey, Jonathan, you just said something a ways back. I think it's important too for young worship leaders. And James, you mentioned it earlier too, the importance of having open communication with your lead pastor.
Yes.
Because sometimes you go in there and you have a lot of assumptions. You have a lot of assumptions, and you may be working against a vision you don't even know it, or you may formulate this whole plan. So I remember the church I'm at now. That was one of the first things I did. I learned that from not doing that before. You have to sit down with your pastor, articulate vision, shape it, customize it, and make sure they're on board with what you're doing. And pastors are going to be different too. Some, like the ones I have now, they're like, do your thing. And if we don't like it, we'll let you know. And I was like, well, the last person was kind of micromanaging, so they can be different. But that's why you can't assume. You have to have those conversations so that you're on the same page with your lead pastor. I think that's vital.
And you're not going to get all the information at one dinner at the steakhouse before you get hired. You need to have those meetings over and over, lay out your vision, talk it over so that you know what you're walking into.
Well, I think that was probably the first thing that I wrote down when I was thinking about this this meeting was understanding. One of the things I wish I understood was that, number one, I am not the primary worship leader. The pastor is.
Yes.
He always will be, and I cannot usurp that. Even if I want to. If I do, God will move me out. But something I learned quite by accident, way too late, was that there are no two ministries in any church setting that work more closely together and depend on one another more than the senior pastor and the worship leader or worship pastor. There just isn't. I mean, you can try to think of one, but there isn't one. Those two things flow together. And so if you're not flowing with your pastor, it's more than just vision. You have to flow with your pastor. If you can't flow with your pastor, if you can't really, to me, it's like, how do I take my vision? Because I have a vision for worship ministry, but how do I take my vision and tweak it to match the pastor's? Because really, I need to find out his vision and then stay in constant contact with him over and over and over, so that I make sure that we are moving lockstep. We are in constant battle together. We should be in constant training together and moving together to accomplish what God wants to do in the church. So that was something I wish I had learned way early on. And I wrote this down: stay in your rank. It helped me to stay in my rank, and to understand authority, that I am under his authority always. And I'm a senior pastor now, but I had this long ago. And when I learned this lesson of staying in my rank and under my authority, under his authority, man, it not only relieved a lot of pressure, but it took me to a new place in ministry.
It does. I think that is so crucial when you've got to promote up all the time and never get in those backroom discussions, because they will try to find you and push and to get you on their side and say,
yes, they
want to be able to say, well, the worship pastor thinks what I think and he needs to go, so to speak. That You cannot ever do that.
No.
If you cannot
No.
get along with him, you're better to leave than to stay
Yes.
there.
Yes.
And
Cause
you
dissension.
know, and you just cannot. And I wish more young guys understand this. You just cannot do that, because it's never going to work out well when you don't, when you stop promoting up and you start promoting self-promoting.
Yeah.
You just always got to promote that pastor. And if you can't, if he's doing something that you can't, then you just got to
Time
shut
to
up
go.
and leave.
Yep.
It
is.
You've
You're
got
right.
to, because
Yeah.
it's just, you're never going to overcome that leadership deficit there. But I know that we have gone long here, guys. Man, I want us to come back maybe and do a part 2 of this, because man, I feel like we're just getting into this good, and we're like, man, we're almost an hour and a half in.
I tell you one since we already kind of scratched it, Jonathan and I we've talked about doing one with music pastors and senior pastors. So, and James and Jonathan qualify as both. But we actually want to have some senior pastors and talk about these things and how to resolve conflicts and how to build these teams, and discuss the challenges, because it's something I don't see anybody on YouTube having these conversations, and they're necessary, especially if you're green coming into ministry. You don't know how to navigate these waters. All you know is, maybe call a friend, but like, say you're James and you're 7th generation heathen and you don't have a bunch of pastor buddies.
Right.
Right. I mean,
that was
me. When I got in the music ministry, I had no pastor friends that I could call.
I called Doc. I called him all the time. That poor man his phone was worn out.
Well, if I could go back to the late 90s, what I wish I would have had was this. I wish I'd have had something like this to watch and hear, like, oh, because I always say this a lot of times. I think that Lee, and as much as I love Lee University, I'm a proud graduate of there. It taught me a whole lot about music, but not near as much about ministry as I wish I would have known. It taught me a lot about music, but I wish that I would have known more about ministry, because ministry was different. But listen, I want to thank all of you. I really do. I want to appreciate all of you for signing on with us tonight. I'm sorry that we have kind of hit our timelines here, but what you guys have said has ministered to me. It's resonated with me, and I want to have you guys back. We want to do this some more, but thank you so much. And we've enjoyed the birds the whole time from James's feed.
I was just going to say, I'll bring the birds again.
I mean, it's been this. I've almost felt like I was sitting in a garden, just having this conversation, this virtual garden.
I wish I could turn it around, because it is beautiful, man. It's gorgeous.
But listen,
my mom asked about a half hour ago. She's like, I'm hearing birds.
Birds. I saw that.
Yeah. But listen, please, if you're watching this, and especially, I really mean this, and I know everybody on here does, if you know a young, minister, music or otherwise, then get them in here, and even have them contact us if they'd like to talk to any one of us. We want to pour in, and we know that we have to pass this baton at some point. I think all of us know that we're on the backside of what we're doing here instead of the front side. And hopefully that backside's long standing, but we know that the baton's got to be passed. And we know that other people need to pick it up. And I share a real concern that I think there is a lack of, proper mentorship in the church today. I think that nobody wants to be mentored. Everybody thinks that they've got it together. And I think mentorship, there is a real, it's a drought. It's a drought of mentorship. Yeah. And so any of these people would love to mentor you. I had an intern a couple summers ago, and I literally lined her up weekly with different worship pastors. And she's like, why? I said, call them and spend 2 hours on the phone with every single one of these. And I did it for like 7 weeks. And I think they helped her more than I did. And she was with me all summer, because they really poured into her. And I know that these people would love to pour into them. Again, it's Doc over here in Charlotte area, I think, and Sharvis. Where are you at, Sharvis?
I'm in Central Florida.
Central Florida. D-Land, Florida. Yeah, Doc's in Charlotte. I'm in Kannapolis, Grove. James, where are you at? Right outside Phoenix, right?
No, I'm in Cottonwood, Arizona, right in the center of the state.
Cottonwood. Okay, Cottonwood. And Angie's out there in the Hickstown's Apprentice. No.
West North Carolina.
Yeah, but listen, we'd love to have one of you come back with us. Thank you so much for all your input, and please like, share, subscribe this, and you guys that are on here, please let them know we have great content every week. We'd love to have you guys tune in with us. But blessings to you, blessings to all of you that have watched us, and we hope you have a wonderful week. We'll see you next Tuesday. I've got a special guest coming on next Tuesday, and I don't have it confirmed positive yet, so I don't want to put pressure on them, but it is really dealing with the emotional and psychological turmoil of ministry. And it's a counselor that has worked with a lot of Christian counselors. And I think I think this is a crisis in leadership and in worship and music and ministry altogether, because the sad thing is ministers don't feel like they can get help because they feel like they'll be weak, and I think it's going to be great to hear from someone who deals in these issues every week professionally, to be able to say to us ministers, hey, it's okay to have the struggle, and it's okay to get the help for the struggle. So we want you to join us next week here on Soul Vitals. Yeah, it's going to be great. So love you guys. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you guys. Blessings.
Love y'all.
Blessings.